Many of you could have been hearing about this word safe, which has become very popular in the last couple of years due to the pandemic. And we know how important it is to remain safe. So taking that forward, my objective in today's session is to talk how safe it is to carry your product in an ISO tanks. So with that in mind, how sustainable it is also when you carry this in an ISO tanks. So we'll talk a little bit of a history, then we will go about the technical aspects, types. I am also going to talk a little bit about various incidents and cases, and then finally coming to how we are going to, how it is beneficial in the long run. So with that in mind, I am taking forward this presentation. I am heading the chemical logistics division of the company Godrej Maritime. Godrej Maritime was established in 1997. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary now. And talking about Godrej, we are into all facets of shipping. We operate into all activities of shipping, NVOCC, chemical logistics. NVOCC is the major part of our business, followed by the chemical logistics segment. Then CIS, reefer units, project cargo, where you carry heavy units, different dimensions cargo, global freight forwarding, air freight, chartering, ship agency, and various other agencies and broking. We have a total global strength of more than 900 employees. The total fleet size combining all activity is more than 37,000 units, which includes the dry container, ISO tanks, reefer, and various other equipments which we operate. So coming to the topic of discussion today about ISO tanks. Now, I want to take all of you a little bit of an history, but before we go to the history, this is a small write-up about the specs of the tank. The specs of the tank is pretty much similar to the dry containers, which many of you could have seen about it. So the dimensions are more or less the same. It's 19.85 in length, 7.84 into wide, and 7.84 into height, and commonly which we all call it as a 20 feet dimension. So those are the dimensions of the equipment. The tank's dimensions is exactly the same like a dry container, the only difference being that it has inside a shell or a circular shell embedded into it. Now it is built mainly to carry all kinds of products, dangerous, non-dangerous, including various food grade products is carried in this kind of an equipment. It has got global approval, IMDG, ADRs. ADR is basically for the European carriage. Then you have the US DOT, which is the American Department of Transportation approval, impacts. So various kinds of approvals are in place as far as carriage of these equipment is concerned. You can have very low capacity. There is lowest capacity is 14,000 to highest we can go as big as 40,000 liters. Now that is what called as swap tanks, which I will be touching it a little bit later. Now, when did all this happen? There has to be some history to it. So it all started some 50 years back when a person in the name of Bob Fosse thought about it to have something like these, which they can use it for transporting products in an intermodal way. The concept of intermodal came from there. So you need to have something which you can use it in a ship, use it in a road, use it in a rail. So with that concept in mind, they started working upon this 50 years back. It was not easy. There are a lot of engineering and science which has gone beyond into making this tanks which you see today, which we are all using it. So from that period, from 1964, he started working on it, but it's only towards 1970 where it all became a successful one and the actual production of these tanks started. Of course, thereafter a lot of changes have come in, but whatever you could see was the design has not changed much. So it's all started from 1970, and the first company to make something like an ISO tank was a company called as Containers and Pressure Vessels based in Ireland. So that's how the design of came in, because a lot of thoughts has to go into it. It has to be lighter, it couldn't be heavy. So those things have gone into it, and earlier during that time there was no ISO standards. ISO standards came at a later stage. It was used to carry in rail, so they have to first have the rail approval. So it took little bit of time before it was globally accepted for carriage. And to where we are today, from 1970-72 to coming today, earlier until end of the century to early part of 2000, all these equipment used to be made in Europe and UK. It's only towards early part of 2000, all these manufacturing shifted to China. We all know the reason for that, due to lower cost, cheap labors. So all the manufacturing shifted there, but the overall design have remained the same. The European and the UK companies tied up with the Chinese manufacturers and they started making it. So more than 90%, 90 to 95% of the tanks which is manufactured in China, with a very small portion which is manufactured by a South African companies called as Welfid Audi. So otherwise, all the equipments, tanks which you see is predominantly manufactured in China. There are very small tank manufacturers in Europe, but they don't make any mass production. They do it in a very small scale. So let us now come to the main topic. So I did cover the history, and I'm going to now talk more about the types and the types of ISO tanks. Now, this is something which all of you could have commonly seen. This is something which is commonly seen by many of the people. This is also used commonly by many of the people. Globally, the type of tanks which is used in a major way is something called as the T11 tank. It is used to carry major liquids. So all major liquids, whether it's class 3, class 6, class 8, class 9. So majority of the liquids are carried in T11 tanks. And I can say that more than 80% of global fleet of tanks is of T11 types. And the advantage is that you can carry different types of liquids in it. So this is the most commonly used kind of equipment which is there. Most of the tank operators have these majority in their fleet. And I'm going to talk more about the detailed specs at a later slide. This is just to give you an idea about the T11 kind of tank. And all these T11s, the inner shell which is there is made up of something called as SS316L type. It has got both the top and the bottom provision to load the product as well as to discharge the product. Now this is also another type of T11. This is called, which is known as swap tanks. This is very popular in European countries and US countries, where people use this for intermodal transportation. So within Europe, it is used predominantly for carrying of lot of chemicals, lot of products like food grade products, juices. It's used for carrying these products. In India, it is getting popular. Customers are accepting it because a lot of multinational companies and exporters are insisting to have this kind of an equipment. It's primarily used for domestic carriage. It's not very much viable for international carriage because of the dimension it is having. It can have lower capacity up till 28,000 to the maximum capacity of 14,000. Since I told you it is of T11, it can be used for carrying all kinds of liquid products. When I say all kind of liquid products, do remember that it need to be compatible with the shell inside into it. So all those liquid products which is compatible, like various kinds of solvents, those can be used to carry in this kind of a product. Again, it has got a bottom discharge valve. I'm going to talk more about that bottom discharge valve probably in the coming slides. Now these are some another kind of tank types. Mind you, the tank type starts from something called as a T1. These are the internationally recognized codes. From T1, it goes all the way to T75. So what we were talked in the past is of T11. So I am just showing you some pictures of another kind of tanks which is called T14, T20 and T22. Externally it looks all same, but there is a difference. You can see the bottom discharge is blind flange, so it becomes like a T14. Then there is an inner tube, you can see it over here, which means you can use it for top loading, top discharge. Since there is no bottom provision, you cannot use for bottom unloading and bottom discharge. So everything has to happen from the top only. Now there are various kinds of type in it: T14, T20, T22. Now what are these types, T20 and T22? The difference in these is the pressure ratings and the thickness of the tank. It mainly depends upon what products you are carrying. So depending upon the product you are carrying, you need to have a suitable T code tank with you. So depending upon those, you need to have these kind of a tank. For example, we carry products like carbon disulfide, propylene oxide in T14 tanks. Then in T20 we carry products like titanium tetrachloride, those products. T22, it's an interesting thing, we are associated with this. In T22 we are involved in carrying something called as kind of a fuel, the fuel which is used to propel the satellites, and we are involved in carrying those fuel. We work with the government organization and with ISRO to bring that product, something very niche and which we are proud of to be associated with. So that is goes in T22 tanks. It's similar to these, but it has got a very high pressure ratings. The shell thickness is there. Product is very dangerous because of the sensitive it is. It is class 3, 6 and 8.1. So those kind of a products goes into T22 tanks. And these tanks, as I mentioned, doesn't have any bottom discharge from a safety point of view. Then the other type of ISO tanks, which is commonly used here or commonly seen, is called as T50. These are something which is used for non-refrigerant tanks. When I say non-refrigerant tanks, you know, like chlorofluorocarbon, R12, R22, the gases which you used for cooling. Ammonia gas is used to carry these products. Then we have something called as T75 ISO tanks, which is used for carrying refrigerant. Now, many of you could have seen when there was a crisis of oxygen, this was the equipment which was imported by a lot of companies like Reliance, Adani. A lot of people imported this equipment from various parts of the globe, supplied it to various companies here in India so that oxygen could be used to transport. So a lot of these were imported during the oxygen crisis, COVID crisis, oxygen related problem which we had in the past. So products like oxygen, helium is carried in equipments like ISO tanks. Now, these are the technical specs and detail about what we covered. As I said, there are T codes starting right from T1 to T75, but commonly you will see these three kinds of tanks, which is called as liquid tanks, gas tanks and cryogenic tanks. Commonly, most common one is the liquid tanks, which I told you, followed by the gas tanks and the cryogenic tanks. I'm not much going into the technical part of it, which I'll do cover in the coming slides. But as I mentioned, these are with bottom load and unloading provision. These also have the bottom load and unloading provision. The design structure of this is very different from the other two, because it being in cryogenic, because of the nature of the product which you carry, it has called a kind of a double valve. So there is one inner valve, then there is a vacuum, and then there is a further inner valve. So this is how these things are designed. Depending upon the cargo, the cargo can be safely carried in these kind of an ISO tanks. For gas tanks, it's more of the shell material is mainly SA315. you may look it little bit similar, but then it doesn't have, it can or cannot have insulation depending upon the cargo you are carrying. So there are various kinds of gas tanks also in it, depending upon the, for ammonia you may need a different one, for argon you may need a different one. So depend upon the pressure required for carrying these tanks, you need those kinds of tanks. So it's more product specific. Now I am coming to the technical part of the tanks. Many of you could have seen this, so I am going to dwell little bit about the technical aspect of the tank. Now this is the complete a model of the tank, which you can see it over here. In general, it is having a frame. You can see there is a ladder which is connected. Then this portion which you can see is something called as a data plate. So there is a data plate over here. It probably gives the complete history of the tank. You know, when was it manufactured? When did it undergo the test? What is the shell material? So the complete history and the specs of the tank is there in this something which is called as the data plate or CSC plate, which is mentioned in some of the part. There are various parts given. There is a drain pipe. So if some material gets accumulated in the top, it gets drained out over there. There is a temperature control which sees what is the temperature inside the tank. Now the most interesting and the feature which makes it more safe, the one thing which I want to talk about is the bottom discharge valve. The bottom discharge valve is made in a very peculiar way. It actually has three closure in it. The first one is called as the drip cap. So there is a cap which you can screw in, and there are two kinds of another two enclosure. One is the foot valve and there is a bottom valve. So literally there are three closures provision which is given. That's what makes it very safe. You know, so even if there is one problem, there is other enclosure is closed. Even if there is some problem, there is one more enclosure. So that's what makes it more safe to carriage. I will talk about little bit more detail when some more pictures are shown in the later part of the slides. There is also, unfortunately, it's not visible over here, but on the other side of the tank, there is something called as a remote cable which comes over here. Now the remote cable is given so that in case there is any emergency, you can just pull it out, and these valve gets locked automatically. So it kinds of stops in case there is any incident or accident, preventing from any incident or accident taking place. So closures during loading process or unloading process, if there is any leakage or problem, you can just pull it. You don't have to come to the valve. You can go to the back and just pull it, and it gets closed. This is also an important thing, document holder, where you can keep, many of the exporters might know about it. You keep your MSDS and other products inside it, which is carried. So in case of any problems or issues on the ship or any other places, they can access that, take it, and try to understand what exactly the product is. There is also earthing connection, which is mandatory. Whenever you try to load or unload the product, you need to connect the earthing so that the product can be loaded or unloaded safely. So this is the top view of the tank. Various safety features. You can see the man lid box. So that's how the top man lid looks. There is various provisions given. These are the safety relief valves. These are various safety features. Why these equipment is considered so safe. These are relief valves, so any kind of a pressure fluctuations inside the tank, the relief valve, just like your pressure cooker, it will release the pressure and ensure that the overall pressure inside the tank remains within the permissible limit. So this is how these are the various safety valves and safety equipments which is put into the ISO tanks, which makes the safe carriage, which makes it safe to carry any kind of products in this particular equipment. Now, we all know sustainability is one of the key point today to be looked upon. So with that in mind, the another biggest advantage of having an ISO tank is it is reusable. There is no defined life of an ISO tank. We have tanks which is more than 30-35 years old and functioning very nicely without any problem, of course you need to maintain it and ensure that the maintenance is done in a very effective way. So this is what makes it very attractive. You can reuse it. It has got a long shelf life. So reusability of this equipment is very high. You can use it. It has got a very high life, subject to the equipment being regularly serviced and it is fully fit for carriage. Then even if you want to dispose it also, it can be recycled. Since I told you it is made up of SS316L, you can easily dispose it of. The majority of the product, maybe the cladding on the insulation, all these things can be completely recycled. So that's further adds to the sustainability part of it. Another advantage is that you can completely remanufacture or something what we call as a refurbish it. So many of the operator globally, after 15-20 years, kind of do this process of refurbishment or remanufacture, which gives another 10 years or more than 8 years of life to the tank. So that's also adds to the sustainability factor of this equipment. So that's the further beneficial part of it when you are using an ISO tanks for carrying your product. And lastly, which is becoming more and more predominant here now, it assists in lowering your carbon footprint, which is a very important factor, especially when you are carrying chemicals, because chemicals are manufactured in companies wherein there is a lot of carbon footprint related problems and issues, but because of these, the way the equipment is designed and the way it has got a longer life, it ensures that it has a very low carbon footprint. Now, we spoke a lot about these things. So now let's talk about what are the beneficial of having these kind of an ISO tank. Now, as we said, the advantage of this is that this doesn't cause any mechanical failure, unless and until there has been no maintenance or no proper check being done. It's very rare you can come across any mechanical failure in ISO tanks. So advantage being you can carry it in rail, road or ships. So that's the biggest advantage, and since it is made up of SS316L, the chances of corrosion is very less. It's also designed to maintain high temperature. So earlier tanks were designed to carry maybe 90 degree to 100 degree. Nowadays tanks which comes in can take temperature as high as 130 degree Celsius. So that's the advantage. Depending upon the cargo, what capacity you want to carry, there is an economy of scales in it, and since it can be used for multimodal, you can put it on a road, you can put it on a rail, you can put it onto ship, you can use it in whichever mechanism you want. In fact, there are many companies which use it for storages also. There are a lot of companies who use this equipment, put it into the factory which is connected to their manufacturing unit, which they use it for storage. Then you also have an advantage that you can unload the equipment and you can release the trailer so the trailer doesn't get stuck. So that's the advantage of this equipment. As I said, since it can be used for multimodal, so it gives you the flexibility to use it in whichever way you want it, and that makes it easier in the handling processes also. We also spoke about the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint which gives is much lesser, 50% lesser than when in comparison when you use a drums to carry your product. And since it is used for multimodal transportation, it further helps in saving the cost of it. Now, what makes it safe? we have been talking a lot about the ISO tanks and ways. What makes it safe? Now, it's the design of this equipment which makes it very safe. The way it is designed. These are the standards, ASME standards under which it is designed. Each and every prototype is actually tested, checked, batch production. Only then those designs is taken for or put into the production. They use a high quality welding machine. The inner shell, it's a plate, and then it is welded from there's one plate is taken, and then it is welded from the top, so it's completely get welded. Then two dish ends are connected, then it's welded. Nowadays it's all what do you call, it's all technologically driven. Earlier the welding and other process used to be done manually, but now it is all technologically driven. So the resistance, because it is made up of SS316L, it's completely corrosion resistant. Then it has got all these regulatory approval. IMDG, the International Marine Dangerous Goods, it's approved for ADR, that's a European one. Then it's impact approved. This impact approved I'm talking about is when you are going to, if you want to carry in US rail, then or in European rail or in China rail, it has to pass the impact test or the rail test. So this is just like you do your, you could have seen about nowadays they're doing the crash test for the cars. Same thing is also done for the ISO tanks. ISO tank is put on a rail car, and it goes at a particular speed. There are facilities similar to the car impact, what you see the car crash test being done. Same way, these kinds of tests are also done on the ISO tanks. Only then the design is approved for final production. I mentioned about the various kinds of safety relief valve which is available there. So this ensures that any kind of pressure fluctuation is there, the safety relief valve releases it so that the pressure is maintained inside the tanks. So those are the safety feature of it. The way it is designed, there's a stiffener ring. It's not there, but if you had seen the pictures, there's a stiffener ring inside it, which further assists in, once the shell, after shell there is an insulation, outside the insulation there is a cladding. So this ensures that to some extent the temperature inside the tank is maintained. Now the frame also ensures that there is no load bearing on the tank shell. Everything is all the weight is taken care by these frames. So that's what the advantage of this particular design of the equipment. And as I spoke about, when you have to maintain this. So there is a mandatory checking which is need to be done, like there's a 2.5 year test and a 5-year test. It's called as air test and a hydro test. So this need to be done during these, apart from your regular maintenance. This is a mandatory test which need to be done and need to be approved by statutory inspection authorities like BV, DNV, or those kind of statutory bodies. So only then it's kind of a fitness certificate for them, in our local transportation terms, what you call. Only then you can use this equipment for carriage. Unfortunately, we don't have these standards defined in the local regulations which we are working to bring in. These are the internationally approved regulations which we follow. Whether we use the equipment for domestic business or international business, we keep following these international standards. So that's what we as a company so these are the factors which makes it safe for carriage in comparison to your road tankers or other modes of transportation. Now, my objective here is not to say whether a road tanker is bad or not. No, that's not the objective. The objective over here is just to give a comparison about why this is more safer when you compare with the road tankers. Now I'll show you some pictures after these which will further substantiate these, but I have explained many of these points in the past slides. So as I said, it doesn't cause a mechanical failure the way a road tanker can cause it. The way it is designed, it assists you in multimodal transportation options. There are various safety measures available in the equipment which ensures that the safety parameters is taken care. I spoke about the 2.5 and 5-year test, which makes it more mandatory and assist in safe carriage. The barrel is protected through a frame, so this function ensures that the safety aspect is taken care. So what happens is that I'll probably show you few pictures after these, and then really able to tell you all how the safety factors comes into pictures when in comparison to the road tankers. I spoke of there is a walkway. There are various fittings available which makes it more safe in comparison to the road tankers. So I'm going to show you certain pictures just to relate is. Now please observe closely all these pictures. There's a very interesting fact in all these pictures which I am showing. You could have seen the way these accidents or damage could have happened. You know, the tanks, these are not only in India, there are some global damages which has happened in global locations also. These are examples of carrying dangerous products as well as dangerous products. But an interesting thing which you may see in all these pictures which are certain damages, that you will rarely see any product being leaked. You know, there is absolutely no product leak. In my last 21 years of experience, I have never come across any incident wherein when an accident happened, a product has leaked. So that's what the specialty of this equipment is, that. And so that's how safe it is designed. So there's a lot of engineering and science which is good in making these, and that's how safe these are. So these are some, this tank literally gone burnt out in a factory during the loading processes, but not a single drop got leaked. This was an accident which has happened. You can see how the tank is completely ripped off, but again, not a single drop got leaked. This is all thanks to the way the tanks are designed. So this is, it got toppled. I have experienced where tanks have toppled from 50 feet down, but not a single product has leaked. It has come out of the locking unit and got toppled down. There are many cases which happens when transporters navigate through the guards, but rarely not come across any incident where any single drop have leaked. So that shows the kind of safety element which this is an toppling case, which you can see it over here. That's a damage case. So lot of these products which is carried here, not a single product has leaked. This is due to the safety features of it. Now again, when you compare that with road tankers, these are the challenges when you come about with road tankers. You know, the chances of the product getting leaked are very, very high because of these things. So and it is primarily this frame, you know, it is this frame design which takes care of the safety element of the major safety element as far as the ASSO tanks are concerned. So these are various cases which has happened just to show about how safe it is and what are the safety features in assisting in making these ASSO tanks more safe for carriage. I think this was the very recent incident which happened. So now I did spoke about the technical part of it. Now none of this, end of the day, this is an equipment and it does require maintenance. And if you don't maintain it, it is going to be a problem. So each and every tank need to be cleaned, tested and repaired at a nominated depots. This is very important. It has to be regularly cleaned and surveyed. Repair need to be done only with specific material. You cannot compromise on these things. So these parameters ensures that the safety factor remains maintained. You cannot say that, you know, if you don't do this, then you cannot blame the tank in case there is any problem. So this is part and parcel of the business which we do. This is something consistent which you need to do it for each and every tank load. After you complete a tank load, it undergoes these processes. In case a tank is dedicated for certain product, then okay, the frequency may vary. Otherwise, after each and every loads, this process need to be maintained. These checks we have our own standards, which is in line with the international standards which we follow. So whether we do this business globally or whether we do this domestically, we follow international standards. So the advantage of using a tank, not only safe, it can be reused, it can be recycled, so it makes more safer and sustainable to carry these. And tomorrow being an Earth Day, some of you might be knowing it. So from that point of view, it makes much more important why we need to have these kind of an equipment which is more safe and sustainable, not only from an environment point of view, also from a safety point of view. So these are just as I said about the ISO tank equipment which we do it. We have tie up with, we are an Indian Chemical Council member. We have tie up with Nicer Globe. Nicer Globe is an initiative by Indian Chemical Council. It was created by a group of chemical companies. We are part of it. This objective of them is to have a safe and environment friendly process. And in case quick response team, they have a quick response team after every distances. The objective is to ensure that there is a quick response team on a pan India basis after every 200 kilometers. They have already started the first phase and second phase, and we are a member of it. So in case there is any incident or damage, they come with all their equipments and facility to salvage the situation. So we have a technical team which is available to handle any kind of emergency response. We also use the Nicer Globe response team to handle any kind of an emergency. All our equipments are maintained in line with the safety standards. We have a very strong QHSE process, which is the quality, health, safety and environment management process. We focus a lot on that. With that in mind, we ensure that whatever equipment provided is in a very safe, you can use it in a very safe and sustainable mode of transportation. So thank you everyone. Open for any questions and answers.
Say we are exporting hazardous chemicals like hydrochloric acid,
Okay.
nitric acid.
Okay.
Those chemicals are exported in 40 kg HDP drums.
Yeah.
And those the export is in the FCL load of 22 metric tons.
Correct.
Now I would like to know, instead of sending in carboys, if we use these ISO tanks, in the costing, what will be the difference in the costing?
Nitric acid is, the product is very cheap. So your logistics cost is your main component. Saying so, when I talk about globally in European and other countries, because they give a lot of importance to safety part of it, they don't use drums and carboys for carrying this product. They use swap tanks or ISO tanks to carry these. So yes, ISO tanks is available, can be given to it, but in our experience or in the past so many years, whenever we are trying to work with customers to export hydrochloric and nitric acid and sulfuric acid, it has found that commercially it is not viable, because another reason is that many of these people who carry it in drums, they also reuse the drums. And many of these customers who export this product also use reusable drums. So due to which many of the time the importance is given more to the cost factor than to the safety factor. So if your objective is more on the safety side, okay, then this may make cost economical sense. But because this product is of very low value in nature, at least from India, we have not come across many people who really prefers to do it. There are somebody who have experimented in giving rubber line tanks for this kind of to carry this kind of a product, but then the economical sense have not fit into it because the low value of the product. So that's the problem. But solution is there, but I think the economical viability is a problem.
If we take the ISO tank,
Yeah.
Again, I would like to know what will be the cost difference between the ordinary road tankers and the ISO tank hiring or transportation cost. I mean.
See, this is changing now. Okay, if you could have asked me this question 5, 6, or 7 years back, it's very clear the road tankers are very, very cheap. But what you have seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years, a lot of these companies, in fact, many of the biggest ethyl acetate manufacturers are using ISO tanks, the swap body ISO tanks, or this kind of an ISO tank to move ethyl acetate internally from their plant to their end user, which means there is an economical sense there when it comes to cost factor of these. And for them, again, safety is paramount. You know, they give importance more to the safety because of previous incidents and cases which they had, as I showed it over there. So it's changing there. Earlier it used to go in tanks. We have a lot of companies now who is using who is using ISO tanks for moving ethyl acetates. I think some of them are moving from Pune to various places in north and other regions. So it's already happening in ISO tanks. In fact, the good thing is that a lot of transporters are also invested in these kind of an ISO tanks because of the demand from the customer. Their customers are telling, we don't want you to supply road tankers, please provide ISO tanks, and we want you to carry our raw materials or finished products in these ISO tanks. So that's a positive side where many of these transporters are also investing in these things. But the problem is there is lack of awareness in them in ensuring that it's properly maintained. So that's the important part of it. If you don't maintain it, because many of them still take them to the road cleaning facilities and clean it, compromising the safety features and features of ISO tanks, which is avoid. Nowadays the number of depots is also coming up at various places. So if these depots are used, it's more safe to carry these in these kind of an ISO tanks.
Okay, thank you.
What will be the cost, like, suppose if he has asked you certain questions where you say it is not preferred, but can you give us a rough estimation of how this costing is taken? Like, suppose if I have to lift the material from the supplier and take it, what would be the cost, and what are the deposits that you ask for leasing such ISO tanks? Do you take some deposit? Do you take some warranty amount from the person who is going in for such type of facilities, or so some little bit of idea can you give us?
We can give this kind of an equipment on lease because some customer says that I have my own transporter, I don't want you to give an end-to-end solution, I will use my transporter. So we give this kind of an equipment them on lease per day basis. We can give it for 1 day to as high as 3 years or 5 years, depends upon the commercial needs of the customers. So that's available. For some customer, they say that no, we want you to give a complete end-to-end solution. So we use our transport facility and this facility and provide the service to the customer. In that case, it is just like your normal road transportation, just like how you do your road tankers. Same way we provide our equipment along with our trailers. We pick the material, we drop it there. Now, when it comes to the leasing part of it, we don't per se take deposit, but we do take at times certain bank guarantee or corporate guarantee, but that is depending upon the customer's credibility. We do a due diligence of each customers. So depending upon those customers' credibility, we are very flexible on as far as that aspect is concerned. In fact, in the last few months or years, I think we don't take any deposit. But we do take either a corporate guarantee or a bank guarantee. But that's depending upon the customer. We do the due diligence of the customer, and the commercial part of it, it varies. It can be as low as 800 or 900 rupees per day per tank. It can go to as high as 1400 to 1500 rupees per day per tank. It depends upon various things: the number of days you need, the duration you need, the capacity, whether it is 24,000, 25,000 or 35,000. So various aspects depending upon that, the commercial factors varies. For end-to-end transportation, of course, it depends upon from where you want to load to where you want to unload it. So depending upon that, if you can give us the origin and the destination, we can probably work out and give you the offer. But if you want me to be very honest, well, you can't compare it with the road tankers. Let us be very honest about it.
I will take the liberty of asking the last question, if you may. Are there any legal mandates coming up which would sort of ensure that road transportation of chemicals are safer?
Sorry, road tankers are?
Are safer.
Yeah.
Like you have the Nicer Globe initiative, which
Correct,
is a
correct.
voluntary one.
Yeah, correct.
But do you see any legal mandates coming up from the government?
No, I think the government is already taking a lot of initiative. I think earlier there were no restrictions on the duration road tankers or those could be life of that. Now they are becoming very, very strict. Like Bombay, you can't enter anything which is more than 8 years old. I think in Delhi, 10 or 15 years old, I don't know, in NCR region, they can't rent. So those restrictions are coming in which will ensure that people will have to be in line to these kind of a requirement. But yes, to whatever information we have, lot of internationally accepted practices, government is trying to incorporate those rules and regulations into the Motor Vehicle Act, or there is a PESO. Now, if you want to carry oxygen or in cryogenic or gas tank, you need PESO approval. So PESO is the body which gives an approval. Now, when the oxygen crisis happened, government came up with a notification and said that any ISO tank which is brought in for carrying oxygen, they brought this notification immediately with a validity for 1 year. PESO has to give an approval within 1 day. So government is also very quick to take this kind of initiative depending upon the situation. From that, now government is incorporating lot of this initiative with PESO and various other things from a safety point of view. Earlier there were no regulations governing these ISO tanks. Now they are coming up with regulations. There is a draft regulation which has come up few months back. It was put on a public domain for various approval. There were challenges related to that where various bodies like ICC and chemical companies have given them the recommendations, which I think they are discussing to incorporate it. I think they will be incorporating these things. It is part of the, I think, the national logistics policy which they are coming up, where they wanted to make it safe, want to ensure that the trailers, the carriages is being safe. One of the other things which they are trying to do is that they are trying to encourage more usage of coastal and rail facility. Rather than using road, you use coastal. So there is a lot of products which is now carried in coastal, like from southern part of India, there is coastal services which comes to western part of India. So it is, those is carried in vessels. There are rail services available. There is a lot of rail services from western part of India connecting to north, and there are tracks of rails wherein these kind of equipments are put and do it. So they are also trying to ensure that not only for road tankers, also for these kind of an ISO tanks, they can move out from the polluted areas. They don't use these kind of traveling routes, instead use the coastal movement or the rail movement from a safety point of view. So they are also focusing a lot on those part. I think as the policy progresses, the national policies and other things which is progresses, these changes will be incorporated. It will be incorporated.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nair.